I might have to get a PS4. Greetings, true believers. Your boy Aziz has returned with another fantastic, artistic, jaw-jobbing video of the week. Alright, that's enough. But yes, I'm aware that there's a new Spider-Man game. I'm aware that I need a PS4 for it. And I have no idea when I'm going to get this PS4, but at some point I have to. But yeah, out of excitement, I decided to draw Spider-Man himself. You can see, if you've been catching up with my videos, I did something a little different with the canvas size, and that was to double it width-wise. And that was because I just wanted to play around with there's like on Instagram, the feature of where you can swipe multiple pictures. The pictures are right next to each other, so sometimes people like to combine those photos so that when you scroll, it becomes actually one large photo. So I just wanted to mess around with that. I've done stuff like that before on Instagram, but I wanted to make a design that specifically catered to that feature. So you have this 2:1 ratio going on right now. And I think it works, especially for Spider-Man as a character, because he's very dynamic and, everything about him is a very cinematic experience. So it fits him anyway. So even not only is that different, but I also kind of wanted to play around with how I go about my line work for my drawings. So here I try to go a little closer to real world style shading. There's not as much line art going on. Most of it is just color blocking and shading. There are some line work around here and there, but that's especially for the darker areas where shadows are, just so it's easier for the viewer to determine different parts of the subject. Like especially when the hand area, lots of shadows are coming up over there, so you'll see that I'll add more line work there. But for example, on the front of his head, there's no line work at all, because that's where the most light is, and that also is where the cutoff for this color is. So it's not necessary, at least in my opinion, to have line work over there. You can see that I'm using more brushes now in terms of opacity changing. So instead of just having one flat color, and that was just me kind of getting more comfortable with the idea of doing a digital painting with a more traditional style to it. So, but it doesn't just stay there in terms of how it looks with the values and shading. What I decide to do later on is to get those values and actually halftone them. So ironically enough, I go back to just doing flat tones, but the reason why I did halftones was because it's basically a two birds, one stone situation, because Spider-Man typically will have a texture on his costume, whether it be a hexagonal texture or a brick style texture. There's typically an underlying texture behind his webs on his suit. So I wanted to find a way to take care of that without making it a viciously tedious process. And so the idea of halftoning it crossed my mind, and it fulfilled two things, which was the texture as well as creating more of an intrigue, because with the earlier values it felt unfinished. So when I added the halftones, it definitely added a more sophistication to the composition. So that's cool. I always like it when I'm able to pull off something without hurting myself with the amount of time that I have. But that was just something I discovered and went with because it was something I found kind of cool. So, I mean, part of the reason as to why I do these drawings is, one, I'm still practicing with my tablet, but I'm also trying to figure out what different ways I can approach a composition. Like, what things can I find out? And the more I work with these things, of course, the more times I do get to learn stuff. So we're almost done with this. I think right now I'm just doing the background. As usual, I try to keep the backgrounds pretty simple, nothing too crazy, just so that the foreground subject isn't competing with the background. But to be honest, the foreground is taking most of the space anyway, so I don't think the background has much to compete with. But I still try to make sure the colors aren't clashing too hard with each other. Also having them not bright, but not as loud or in your face, just because red is already in your face, and anything that is more in your face than that, it's going to be nuts. So I try to keep everything low toned, like none of my colors are too saturated. It creates this kind of cool effect that almost retro like, but still with those modern attributes to it that keep it, I guess, relatively up to date. But yeah, that's pretty much it with this shindig. I think this one took longer. Yeah, this one took longer than the other guys. Or maybe it didn't. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching.